think about. And I even had a guy tell me he got bit by a snake. I can't remember what it was, but the antivenom was $75,000 a vial.
And we got to have good insurance that you're going to go out.
I guess so.
Risky behaviors require insurance, right? We all learned this.
Well, you are on, and our listeners are listening to Columbia's hottest and fastest growing podcast. We're here for the health of it. I'm Dr. Randy. This is my co-host with me, Dr. Tom. We got a great guest for you today. We got Michael Mayo.
Like the mayonnaise.
Yep, Mayo. He's the owner of Palmetto Outdoor, and you are an alumni as an ambassador. You're a Columbia ambassador, South Carolina ambassador, but an alumni now.
That's correct.
You've been replaced.
I have with a fresh new group, and now all of the alumni and previous classes are here to support the new class.
Yeah. Who do you think's following the most in your footsteps of the new ones?
Well, everybody has their unique vision of Columbia, which is what Experience Columbia has ultimately done to find a diversified cast of individuals that seem to do the best job of representing Columbia in their own way. One thing I am proud to see a part of the new class is Experience Columbia has stepped up with John with Historic Columbia. They have been the foundation that has done a lot of the storytelling, the preserving of the structures here in Columbia. And so representative from their organization, John will be doing a great job of carrying that torch. And I really love the history of this area, being from here all my life.
Yeah, so you grew up here.
I did.
What high school did you go to here?
Well, it was off in the country a little bit, but out in Lexington High School.
Okay.
That'd be my school. If I lived on the other side of the road, I'd have gone to Airport a little bit closer.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I'm very proud of West Columbia. I've lived there. That'd be my second home.
Nice.
And West Columbia is up and coming quite a bit, too.
They are.
Now.
They're doing a great job of improving on the great skyline, the view that they have of the Columbia skyline. Mm-hmm. They like to say the West is the best when it comes to seeing the city. And they're doing a good job with the restaurants. The idea is people are coming here from all over the Southeast to experience the whitewater through either tubing or the national park through canoe trips. And while they're here, we're wanting to show them that there's multi-day activities to do, and do that through nice hotel stays, great restaurants, and other activities. I just went to the Marionette Theater the other day and had the time of my life.
Really? Nice.
Yeah, a really good time.
What is that?
Well,
puppets, right?
Puppets, on strings.
Doesn't know what Marionette is.
I wouldn't know. No.
And that's why we're here.
Now you have to educate me on that.
to tell you about these places.
One time I was in, my uncle lives in Henderson, just outside Las Vegas. So there was a puppeteer or a puppet master.
Yes.
And I think he was on America's Got Talent.
Oh, wow.
But he did an entire puppet, I guess it was a comedy show.
Okay.
But he did a whole routine, and it was amazing. But I don't think I've ever been to an actual puppet show. Yeah,
well, it's like the Marionette. They have them on strings. They're above. I don't know the magic. I'll have to let him tell you all about that. But it was the time of my life. Being here all my life, I hadn't had the chance to go see a show yet.
Yep.
They're kind of tucked in out of the corner. So it was a great experience. And again, it's always been a vision of mine to get children outside the four walls, help them realize there's more to life than video games and internet. And that's always been a driver for Palmetto Outdoor, the company. And so we see that things like this that are also wrapped around family activities that a diverse family group of a community can enjoy.
It's a real issue right now. Like I just met with a guy yesterday, probably 17 years old, but between sitting at school and sitting on his phone and then sitting on his video games all day long. He's probably sitting 16 hours a day, 15 hours a day. And I don't know, when I talk to kids, like if they falling out of a tree, do you ever fall out of a tree?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I fell out of tons of trees.
That's right. Jumping bikes?
Yes.
Forts.
Making our own jumps and then hitting those jumps.
Right.
It's not happening very much anymore.
No. We live in a different age.
Yeah.
And kind of a side shoot here, I'd like to do walking tours from time to time.
Yeah.
Our busy season with tubing is during Memorial Day through Labor Day. We offer the congaree trips year round. They're always popular, but we do have some downtime. And around December and January and now into February, I try to do walking tours. I have a tendency never to charge for these. I seem to get a lot better feedback, sometimes through Google and sometimes through monetary tips. But what we have here is an opportunity to get children outside to do a walking tour, enjoy the green space, to realize what's out there.
Right.
Now, that, as you pointed out, is hard. It's a harder sell, the outdoors. But I've noticed that children still gravitate towards gold stories. And so I'll go ahead and tell you guys real quick, on the West Columbia
Like
side,
mining gold, like that kind of thing?
there's a sunken ship, the SS Columbia, a 135-foot rear paddle wheel steamer that got lodged into the mud in 1908 due to some circumstances before that. This steamer slowly weathered away, but you would see hundreds of these steamers going up and down the Congaree River on a weekly basis, just like in the Mark Twain books you'd see on the Mississippi. Maybe not so big, but similar in design. Well, on December 12th, 1864, 3 steamers set sail out of Columbia, South Carolina on their way to Georgetown. Never made it. And along the way, they were carrying $135,000 worth of gold and silver.
What?
And never made it to Georgetown. So what we do is we bring a group down, we tell the history of the area, then walk them down to the remnants of the SS Columbia. Not much of it left. Looks like some boards stuck in the mud really at this point. But once you start telling that story, they drift away from their iPhones and their iPads.
Right.
And they lock into what's going on. And the best part is getting to the end and realizing that they now just want to learn more about that story. And I leave some components out because I don't know the answer, honestly. I run on some history. I tell a little tale to go with it.
Yeah.
And at that point, I look forward to the child or the young adult to go out and find the answer. And if they come back and tell me the answer, I know I did my job.
That's cool. So I'm curious about your childhood then. So tell us, like, what got you into outdoors? Were you a big fisher, a hunter?
Funny, I've never been fishing or hunting a day in my life.
What?
Yeah, let me tell you why.
Not even fishing?
This is great.
I thought you were going to
I
have all
didn't
kinds
see
of
this
fish
coming.
stories.
I can answer some fish questions, though. I can tell you the reason why we're so lucky to have 2 magnificent species of fish here in the metropolitan area. But first, my dad got me in a kayak when I was 6 years old and tried to unsuccessfully drown me all my life. It's the best thing he ever did for me, though. It gave me a great appreciation for the river and its riverbanks.
Yeah.
And in time, I learned to appreciate these things and wanted to learn more. And so I was a Class 5 boater by my early teens, running whitewater and things like that, working for some local outfitters, but saw that there wasn't an answer for that group that was looking to get out into the whitewater but not learn how to kayak.
Yeah.
And so at the time, I was instructed to send those people to the tire shop around back because we only sell canoes and kayaks. And so I would send them around back, never knowing that the seed was planted so that when 20 concrete steps were installed down at the West Columbia Riverwalk Amphitheater, can't give enough credit to the River Alliance and the leadership of Mike Dawson, who built all the green space out. And then they hand that over to the city, and the city then runs it. But it was just a goat trail going down to the water. That wasn't going to work. But when they put 20 steps, concrete steps going down to the water, that in February of 2006, that enabled the light bulb to go off from the seed that was planted in my early teens of sending people to the tire shop. And that light bulb went off, and I said, hey, this is an opportunity for a tubing business, and that people will drive from Florida, from Ohio, from D.C. to come to the Three Rivers region to float down these rivers because of the whitewater. We're not the only city with whitewater. Columbus, Georgia has whitewater. Richmond, Virginia has whitewater. But there is a beauty in the lack of progress in this area. And the beauty comes from the fact that when you put in where you're generally putting in around the riverbanks region below the big rapid, but when you put in, you're floating down a 3-hour journey. And along the way, if I told you you're in the middle of nowhere, you would believe me. Until you get to about 2/3 of the way through your trip, and you come around the bend, and the State House is up on top of the hill, and your takeout is just over your shoulder. And this is the kind of experience that people are willing to make the trip for. And that's what separates us from the other cities like Columbus, Georgia, and Richmond, where they have kind of piles of coal, railroad tracks, and trestles and things like that. They have done good with some of their river walks, so I don't want to discredit the work that they've put into it. Just want to make sure that the residents of the three of Columbia, West Columbia, Casey, Irmo, know what they have in their backyard, and they have
See, I didn't know any of
Wilderness
that.
Wonderland.
I didn't even know we had whitewater. Did you know we had whitewater?
No,
I had no
never
idea.
heard that.
Whitewater in our backyard. To go experience whitewater, you have
Yeah.
to go up to the mountains where there's one hotel and one restaurant. Here in the Three Rivers region, you have all the amenities to support recreational tourism. So this is what I like to say is I've challenged myself since I was young to find out what separates us from those other cities that I mentioned that have whitewater.
Yeah.
And I have the answer for you. It is the Spanish moss. It is the only place in the world where you can see Spanish moss draped
Yeah.
over rushing rapids. A taste of the upstate with the low country, all wrapped up here in one package. And that's what we have here, especially for the local residents to realize what they have in their backyard. But we realize that this is an international attraction, especially a southeastern attraction. And then the icing on the cake is the fact we have a Congaree National Park, the Carolinas' only national park. Now, I don't want to cause any too much strife here, but don't tell North Carolina this, but the Great Smokies is actually in Tennessee.
Really?
Well, the visitor center, that is. And so, but
Tennessee takes credit for that, huh?
and North Carolina, of course, will get the residual from it. But it is the largest, as far as tourism goes, the largest national park. I think Congaree National Park could benefit greatly from the fact that it's not too far from the Great Smokies, but more importantly, it's only 30 minutes away from Columbia, West Columbia, and Casey.
Right.
And so it's we offer that trip year round. And what we notice, unlike our tubing, where again, Florida, Ohio, D.C., the Congaree National Park is drawing them in from all over the world. We're running a trip today. We ran one yesterday.
Wow.
We had 9 people sign up last night. I can't wait to see where their zip codes are coming from.
Yeah.
We have to hunt them down because they're always peculiar. They're not formal to the United States code. But it's been a lot of fun. And so we have 2 very incredible resources. Whitewater for the exciting individual from Memorial Day to Labor Day is when we offer the tubing. And then you have the Congaree National Park. At first, it was limited in our offerings, but one thing that we're proud of is we offer that trip 7 days a week as long as there's 2 people wanting to go.
No kidding.
Yep.
That's pretty incredible. As far as national parks, what's the total number of national parks?
It's now over 100. I don't have the exact number. I'd say we're probably approaching 110 at this point, but I know that it crested over 100 about a year or 2 ago.
And you guys are the main kind of group that's taking people down the river through this and
We are the best group that takes people down to the Congaree National Park. Yeah. But no, there are a couple other outfitters that are local that do a very great job. What has been nice is the cooperation between all of the outfitters. Some outfitters are only operating during certain days. Others just operate maybe on the weekends. Since we open 7 days a week, we work together. When our trips fill up, we will certainly send business.
Over,
The goal is always to make sure they have an incredible experience in the Three Rivers region through hotel stays and eating at good restaurants, and having multi-day activities here. We want the hotels and restaurants not to go back to city council and tell them that Palmetto Outdoor is doing a good job. We want those restaurants and hotels to tell city council that the river is doing a good job and the national park is doing a good job. And that's where we feel we win.
So, and that's where like people that have on their bucket list to attend every national park, you probably get a lot of those people coming and then utilizing your services from all over. Is that?
Yeah. What we notice, what's been really nice is we notice that people are coming down from the mountains to see a different landscape. And that's what you get with Congaree National Park is a taste of the upstate and the low country, literally wrapped up here in a nice package in South Carolina. But we also see people driving up from Charleston. And I take a lot of pride in that. Charleston is, what gets into the magazines, in the top 10s, all of that. Everybody always talks about Charleston, and it's a beautiful place. They do a great job. There's more to South Carolina than Charleston. And, well, if you're going to head to the mountains, you might as well stop off in Columbia to take a break.
I think when I'd be reading reviews on who to use, I would probably look at who has the best snake boots and no gator incidents. And I'm sure that's got to be a factor, because as soon as I talk about going down the river or being around the Congaree River, those are the top two things that I think about. And I even had a guy tell me he got bit by a snake. I can't remember what it was, but the anti-venom was $75,000 a vial.
And we got to have good insurance if
I
you're going to go out.
I guess so.
Risky behaviors require insurance, right? We all learned this. But no, I'm glad you brought that up. This is something, just a quick point that we have discussed with the Park Service. We have a plan in case this was to take place. If there is an individual to get bitten by a poisonous or venomous snake, we do have a mitigation plan. The first responders actually already have a plan instilled with the Park Service. So we have communication with them so that we could quickly extract anybody if that was to happen. However, our outfitter, we're the only outfitter that solely uses canoes for our trip. The purpose of that is not snakes, but to keep the customer dry. We offer the trips again year round, so it's December and it's 40 degrees outside. You want to keep your feet and your rear end dry as best as possible. So that's the purpose of the canoes. But a second benefit from that would be the taller sides. You ain't got to worry about no snakes popping up between the scupper holes and you sit on top or something like that. So, at least a snake has to run into something before it goes crawling up in your boat. Of course, snakes like to take a break and lay on branches. And so we're going under branches throughout the trip, and there's things you want to be aware of. We never want a snake to fall in your boat, of course.
Right.
But we find this to be a very it's an opportunity that we've never had to broach before. Knocking on that wood.
Nice. Yeah.
But the point is, I do want to make sure everyone understands here that 90%, 9 out of 10 snakes that we see in the park are non-venomous. Generally, we never see a venomous snake on our trips. They're just brown water snakes, things like that. When the levels in the swamp change, though, that does affect the high water points, and snakes sometimes are forced onto little areas. I don't think the visitor is so much the victim in that circumstance as the snake is during high water. I can promise you that snake's coiled around that tree and ain't going to let go until that water goes back down. The park dynamic changes when it goes up, of course. The water spread over areas open up a little bit more.
Yeah.
But in the end, we don't see snakes ever becoming an issue. We feel like it's an opportunity to further a business model and promote the wild snake experience and see if there's a whole nother demographic of customer that would seek out this product. But currently, we certainly hold true that chances of seeing a venomous snake slim to none. If you do, it's a great opportunity to take a picture, keep your distance. There's nowhere along this trip where you're going to feel forced into a position with a snake. I can promise you that.
Right.
As far as tubing down the river, seeing a gator in the park, you'd be lucky. I've never seen one.
Yeah.
I'd love to see one, and I've never seen a gator in the park. You want to go see gators, go to Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. But they have been spotted in the canal. Sometimes they're spotted in the Congaree River, but never on the Saluda because of the whitewater and the cooler water conditions. Everyone always asks me, what's the water temperature? It's refreshing. But too refreshing for the gators. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so no gators on your tubing trip. Don't worry about dipping your toes out there. How deep is the water? It varies, but typically it's waist to chest deep.
Gotcha.
The swamp, however, Congaree National Park, chances you seeing a gator again, slim to none. But the snakes being out there, they're far and few between. Chance of seeing a venomous one, slim to none. But on your tubing trip, I get to ask that same question. Will I see a snake on my tubing trip? Probably not. A snake out there in the middle of that whitewater river is prey to birds. I hear many more reports of snakes on the Riverwalk than they are in the river. So just be careful walking up and down throughout the green space. And if you see a critter there on the Riverwalk, walk around it, give it its space. I promise you, one sunning out in a snake does a snake sunning. A snake out in the sun is not trying to move from its position.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
And I'm curious then what the identification markers are on a poisonous snake. I don't want to spend too much time on snakes because I know there's a lot to it or you don't see them that often. But if I was out on the Riverwalk or tubing or in a kayak or a canoe and I see a snake, how do I know if it's a poisonous one or if it's an aggressive one or if it's just a little brown water snake. Because I've always heard that brown ones you stay away from, black ones aren't bad.
It's funny. That's a good question. It's kind of like, I think, a lot like pointing out poison ivy or something like that. It has to be pointed out to you several times for you to really, to be able to walk out in nature confident and know that you can spot these things yourself. However, we have a poster in our office. We keep it up so that the guide sees it on their way out with the manifest. And it's from DNR. And that would be what I would suggest is go to DNR's website. They do the Department of Natural Resources, South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. They do a great job of pinpointing the different snakes, different variety of breeds here in South Carolina, ones that are venomous, the ones that are non-venomous. The thing that gets confusing is that, the brown water snake or the banded brown water snake gets confused with the water moccasin that's infamous, the snake that chases you in the water, that one, also referred to as a cottonmouth. Now, one really unique feature about the two that you would spot if you were out in nature from the get-go is the brown water, the banded water snake is normally 90% submerged. You really only see the very tip of its back and maybe a little bit of its head, keeping its nostrils out of the water to breathe. However, moccasin or cottonmouth, it floats like a styrofoam block in the water. I mean, over half of the body's out of the water. It will coil up and gives it even more buoyancy. So they are, extremely good swimmers. Nature's done a great job creating those. And then one stretched out, you'll notice that it's a shorter snake, but a lot more girth, larger snake in size.
And this may be a dumb question. Are all snakes swimmers? Like
They, as far as I know, most of them can.
They just stay on the top of the water.
Yeah, I feel like most snakes can swim. I wouldn't say I've seen a large variety of them, but your common snakes in South Carolina are typically most of nature's been there, done that, and had to get across that river at some point. Whether it's a turtle trying to cross a road or a snake crossing a river, they run into these obstacles. Most species, your common species, would be able to swim. But that's where the moccasin has a much more large advantage, that it's kind of wearing its own flotation device. Which I like to also bring up that everyone must wear their life jacket. We suggest you wear one at all times.
I saw you highlighted that on your bio.
Well, that's why I was wondering about safety stuff. Is there any other fears that you've had people worry about, like snakes and gators, that kind of thing, that are weird or strange? And then on the other side of that, what are safety things that you guys have put in place over the years just to make sure that the voyage is always safe for everybody?
I would say instead of snakes being a primary concern, probably weather is what you want to pay the most attention to. We're especially in the summertime. I am diligently looking at the weather like an investment, stock investment of some sort, just constantly watching it day by day. Weather, as I've always said, if you don't like the weather in South Carolina, wait 5 minutes.
Right.
That goes for a thunderstorm, but also can go from a very nice day to a thunderstorm pretty quickly. So really for us, it's making sure we have a plan put together if a storm was to come up. Again, it depends on the scenario. If you're in the swamp, if you're in Congaree National Park, it's a different plan versus if we have a storm come up on the river.
Yeah.
I'll get to the river here in a minute. But for the park, the canoes actually make a great lean-to shelter. You find a tree with a V, stick your canoe up in there, get up underneath your canoe. It's not only a shelter from the rain, but I tell all of our customers that if they do bring up lightning, it's not so much the lightning that's dangerous, it's the high winds that could drop a limb out of a tree.
Oh, right.
And that's where getting under tall trees become dangerous. Even though it seems the right decision, you really want to find a smaller grove, and that's where our guides are there. Of course, if you do a Congaree National Park trip, you're with a guide, so we're there the entire time. We basically pull to the side, wait the storm out if need be. Hey, some of our customers say, I got a poncho, let's keep going. But others take a break, and then we get back on the trail. Now, for tubing, that is an incredible question. What is our safety protocol for tubing?
Yeah.
Well, for years, we started in 2006 with 50 tubes in a 15-passenger van. It was pretty much me and whoever else I could find to straggle along for help.
Yeah.
There wasn't much safety other than a safety speech. I could go verbatim right now, but you got to come on one of my tubing trips to hear it. But for probably a decade or so, our protocol was to make sure that any staff that came on, anybody who walked you to the river, had to do the safety speech verbatim. And I'm talking about every and, but, all those words have to be in there. In return, the staff member would get $1 raise, so in control of their own destiny, kind of thing. So we both win. So that was about a decade, but of course, we went from 50 tubes to having 100 tubes, and now we have thousands of tubes. And so we can put over 500 people down in one day, thousands in a weekend. Wow. We really are a huge attraction when it comes to this area, being that it's seasonal. But during that season, it's also prone to those 5 o'clock thunder boomers that come up, out of nowhere, right? And so you got 400 people on the water during the middle of one of these thunderstorms. What is the protocol? Well, I'm glad to inform you guys that we met with the Columbia Fire and Rescue team. They were very kind to invite us along with Columbia Parks and Recreation staff. We got and sat at a table to develop a plan that we then issued out to the other battalion chiefs in like West Columbia and Casey. So we got almost a group chat going. This is something, when you deal with multiple different municipalities, sharing different funding, trying to get everybody to work together can be sometimes difficult. But for the first time ever, I saw everyone coming together as a collective for river safety. And so in return, what we did is we actually have we implemented a plan where on Saturdays and Sundays, being our busiest days, we would put a staff member at 2 points along the river. Certainly always covering the large rapid Shandon, which is the class 2 on our tubing trips, about halfway through the trip. It's the largest one. We'd have a staff member there, but at certain levels, we'd also put one up near the put-in we call it pop-up hole or the mosh pit, but it's the first rapid you run, but it's a dunker if you ain't paying attention. So just to make sure people safely get back in their tube and continue their trip, or if they needed to get off, we could do something as an extraction. But what I want to say is that we're happy to report that we took the corporate social responsibility of putting safety personnel out there, not only someone who kayaks but knows CPR, but more importantly, who also has a communication device, so that if a storm was to come up or an incident was to take place, that staff member can immediately establish communication with me or my operations manager, and we could then relay that out to Columbia Fire and Rescue. And what we learned from this past year of using that tool is, one, as a company, we let everybody know how many people were going to be out safety-wise that day. And then we also let them know that evening that all of our customers are off the water. Something that's very important that sometimes gets passed over by other outfitters that just let people keep the equipment overnight. We were able to let Fire and Rescue account for all of our customers.
Right.
Everyone, all 500 people went down the river today. All 500 people came home safely. But at that point, we have a communication device so that we could then get out to everybody to let them know if there was an incident. And we were also able to do, we always make sure the customer needs to call 911. They call 911. We hand them our phone. But what we were able to do is make sure that we had a situation that we were able to talk to the customer, and most customers just wanted to know where they were and keep on floating, and that's it.
Gotcha.
But when a thunderstorm did come up, which it did this past summer, I can't give enough credit to Mr. Bill Thomas, the Yoda of the river, who was out there he was out there on that water right at Shandon when the storm came up, and he was able to huddle everybody together. And what we found that day,
do you throw a rope? Like, I'm trying to visualize what that looks like. How do you get
rain has its own way of driving people to the shoreline. And currently you can still kind of get up and down the shoreline without too much difficulty. But we were able then to group everybody, at least to that one rapid. The beauty of this stretch of river is it's kind of divided up in 3 sections. You got a flat water section, the first third, then kind of a whitewater section, the second third, where you merge in with the broad. You can have one hand in cold water, one hand in refreshing water. So it's a really neat dynamic where the two currents merge. I could argue all day as to where the Congaree River really starts, whether it starts up there where the currents collide or down there at the Gervais Street Bridge where the last island separates the two. I say it's at the last island since this is my interview.
Yep.
But even Mother Nature would beg to differ. I love to point this out on my history tours that you can go down to the West Columbia Riverwalk and look across that river, and you'd say, this is the Congaree River. It's one river. But Mother Nature would beg to differ. If you go to like satellite imagery through some of the different media platforms, you can take a picture of Columbia, and you'll see that there are two separate currents, two different colors. The Saluda, because of Lake Murray, is kind of a man-made filter, so the water's generally green, where the Broad has a little more sediment in it. So even though we see one river right there at the Gervais Street Bridge,
right,
Mother Nature says it's two rivers until you get to the Congaree National Park, where the rivers really start to wind, and at that point, the currents merge. So who knows where the start of the Congaree really is.
Gotcha.
And helmets are probably a thing, I would imagine.
Well, with tubing, not as important, and our kayaking, which we don't offer a whole lot of kayaking anymore, mainly just pushing towards tubing being the most versatile watercraft. With sit on tops, you typically are falling off. We offer them upon request. We have helmets available, but typically we don't really have any requests for helmets. Life jackets,
yeah.
Everyone gets a life jacket. We suggest you wear one at all times is our answer.
Yeah.
Randy wears a helmet when he drives, so he'll provide one, or you can probably use the one you use in your car.
I brought my own helmet.
Yeah.
It never hurts. I mean, I'll tell you, you're not going to get hurt in the watercraft. You're going to get hurt getting in and out of your watercraft. I've seen so many people slip on those slippery rocks and need some adjustments.
Yep. So is there a certain age that you allow people on there, and then a certain like weight limit?
So our Congaree National Park, not so much. With that trip, typically it's like 6 years of age or older. The important part is that you're going to be with other participants on the trip, so don't want to ruin their experience. A lot of people are here to listen to the birds, and so we try to make sure we're we're very cautious on how low we lower that age limit for Congaree National Park. So it's kind of we just make sure that the parents know that this kid has to stay still in the boat.
Right.
We don't want to flip the canoes. We try to avoid that at all costs. Mm-hmm. And our success rate is through the roof. Go check out the comments on Google. They'll tell you. I don't know if I can say that. I apologize. Go check out the reviews online, and that would show you how successful that is. However, the age limit for tubing, it's a great question, 10 years of age or older. We determined that age. We're going to go ahead and say our insurance company determined that age, but we went ahead and established that, and as being the age where we see that it's not that it's a dangerous rapid. A class 2, it's a scale of 1 to 6. Yeah. So class 1 is like ripples in a bathtub. No danger, really. Class 2, you have waves about a foot to a foot and a half tall. It does have the ability to capsize your boat, but the risk of incident is very slim. You just kind of swim out the rapid. Once you get to a class 3 without skills, you got to have a good chance of flipping over, but still don't have a risk of life situation there. But that's when you get to class 4 and class 5. You got to have experience. There is a slight risk, things like that. So on the Saluda, we got 1s and 2s, the perfect rapids.
Yep. Nice.
And so the class 2 waves about a foot to a foot and a half tall. It's not that it's dangerous for a 10-year-old. There's no obstacles you have to avoid. Just pretty much float out the rapid. When you get to the bottom, you jump back in your tube. But we have had 8-year-olds where the parents are like, oh, yeah, they're good. And they are. But then we've had 12-year-olds that are not necessarily in danger, but are traumatized. Because as we tell every parent, it does have the ability to separate you from your child. And that's kind of the variable factor.
Oh, right.
Once I laid that option to them, the parent quickly will decide if they feel comfortable or not moving forward.
I've only been whitewater rafting once, I think, and it was in Fernie, BC.
Wow.
In Canada.
Okay.
And we did I think it was for graduation, my younger brother's graduation, and we went all the way up the mountain. We went dirt biking one day, and then we went fly fishing one day, and then we did whitewater rapids the next day, and it was one of those huge rafts that 14 or 16 people are on.
Yeah.
And I remember just being on there, and the guide we had helmets, we were strapped on, and there was a guide in the front, guide in the back with big paddles, and just holding on for dear life, thinking, what am I doing, and why am I doing this? Because it was just wild. There was nothing that you could do if you fell out. So they were just screaming, hang on, and you're just hanging on for your dear life. Which I would imagine, as you were talking about that, is a class 4, maybe?
That sounds about right. A lot of the when you move into the rafting world, you're probably moving into a lot of class 3s, and then any good rafting company worth its salt would have a class 4 or 5 thrown in there.
Yeah. But you need a guide for that.
Oh, absolutely. I think Nantahala Outdoor Center, they do a good job on the Nantahala, where you can either have a guide or not have a guide. It's generally a class 2, class 3 experience, so not as formidable. But once you move into the class 4s, there's other rivers that, you have to have a guide, wear a helmet, things like that.
And that's going down a mountain, probably, when you get into the 4s.
Well, as funny as it may seem, when I say there's whitewater in the Three Rivers region, there's whitewater here in your backyard, I really mean it.
Right.
Wow.
We do have a power utility. Dominion controls the Dreer Shoals Dam. We refer to it as Lake Murray Dam, but that hydroelectric project can pump out, if all 5 turbines are going, it releases 18,000 CFS. That's cubic feet per second. So if you take a cubic foot, there's 18,000 of them going by you every second as you're looking at it. So when the Saluda, or when I should say power generation is at full tilt, that river is massive and worth experiencing on the raft. Now, certainly we would not advise going out there in a tube, canoe, or kayak unless you're a whitewater boater, but for a rafting experience, it's quite a lot of fun. I actually have done it several times. Also happen to own a 8-person raft. So from time to time, I can take my friends out there. I'm going to have to invite y'all out there on my next journey.
Yeah.
I'll tell you more about
I'll
that
wear a
in a
helmet.
second.
I'm wearing a helmet.
You will
yeah,
definitely
sure.
want to. But Columbia, our tubing trip is going from what we call the Riverbank Zoo region. Everybody's familiar with where that's at, right off the interstate. We put in below Mill Race. That is the quote-unquote big rapid here in Columbia.
And can you explain that? Because when you drive into the Riverbank Zoo, you can go left. You get off the main highway, you can go left to the zoo, or you can go right, and that's where I see all the rafts and the tubes.
That's correct. That would be the access point. As you get off on Greystone, you go left towards the zoo. If you head to the right, that's Candy Lane. That's Candi, Candy Lane. And
the strippers.
I thought more like the drink.
I've never had a Candy Lane drink.
The Candy Lane sounds delicious, nonetheless. But yeah, you drive to the end of Candy Lane, and you'll see along the way an access point. And I always love to challenge individuals I meet how much access is needed to an area.
In square feet?
How much access? How many access points?
2.
More.
4.
Always need more. We need more access points, and that's the one big thing that
The answer was more.
The answer?
The answer was more.
But that's what we're lacking there on Candy Lane.
Yeah.
Is an access point. Yes, you can get down to the water, but is it when the tourist or the traveler comes in there, if they've signed up for a trip and they get down to the water, are they going to see mud, trash, or are they going to see a pristine start to their experience? And I know for especially any fathers or mothers out there, when they're trying to introduce their kids to something new, they do not want to see these side shoots. Which, by the way, referring to the age thing, another thing we make sure to point out to our customers is we do not allow styrofoam or glass. We will never put profits in front of conservation. So make sure you show up with anything but styrofoam and glass, and we'll certainly get you out there. I'm really good about jumping around, so I'll get back to your main point, whitewater rafting. We're lucky to have the power utility now. They're here to make money, so we don't have controlled releases, but when they decide to turn it on, or maybe everybody turns their air conditioner on in the summer, they might release water, and when those 18,000 CFS cubic feet are going by you per second, that class 3 rapid turns into more like a class 4, class 5 if you run it the wrong way, which is the way I like to run it. There's a feature inside of it called Kong. It's like a huge hand that will reach up and swallow your raft whole. You see it coming as if it's a whale on the horizon shooting air out the blowhole. It's quite a ride. But that's what we have here, 7 miles of whitewater. When you're doing a tubing trip, it's really only 2 miles from the zoo down to Gervais. But when they're releasing water, it allows you to access other sections of that river. Because not only do you have a lot of water going by, but it's traveling, at several knots a minute. And so it's just moving miles per hour by probably 5-7 miles an hour.
Dang. So, I mean, with children too, have you ever had anybody on there that like brought their video games?
That's a new
like
one.
on the canoe?
Well,
That's what I was gonna, or their dog. I sometimes, when you're talking about the access point, I was thinking too, like someone just bringing their dog and their, I don't know, their magazine or something.
The dog's a great question. We get that more so. I mean, for tubes, good to go. Bring your dog. It's the only trick is it has to ride up on the bus with us, so it just needs to be. It'll be around other people, so it's got to be a friendly dog. But otherwise, for tubing, the dog really doesn't cause any issue. We're happy to rent a tube out to your dog.
Nice.
Bring your life jacket. Bring your dog's life jacket. We only have so many available, so it never hurts to bring a jacket for your dog. But the Congaree National Park trip, where you're going to be in a canoe, I do have some great advice for anyone who has a dog and wants to go canoeing.
The guy's bleeding over here.
It's so exciting. You're already in it.
He was
already.
talking so
I
aggressive.
started talking about, all right, to give the backstory on this too. So I've had a beard for the last 2 years, 3 years.
Oh boy, we're getting personal story.
And I bet on the Eagles to win the Super Bowl, and I bet my beard on it. And I thought I was going to win. And the guy who it was against, his name's Aaron Ellison. He loves his beard more than anything. It would be like me betting you against your beard, where I know that you would not want to lose that bet. But it wasn't a big deal for me. But since then, now I've been shaving and keeping a beard off, and I'm just not used to it.
See it.
I've got bad at shaving.
I can only imagine. I've had it for over 2 decades, so it's been there forever, man.
Never clean shaven for 20 years.
I think it went on, almost. Let's say almost 2 decades, but shortly after high school, probably about the time I started this company.
Yeah.
I decided it's time to fill out the hat, fill out the figure, and keep the beard till it goes gray.
You need a good beard for what you do, I think.
Well, and we didn't even talk about your hat. That's a solid. I mean, it says outdoors. What kind of hat is that?
Man, it's funny how this hat's never mine when I get it. I have another 9 of them back at my office on a stack. Yeah, about one every 2 years I go through. So been open since 2006. Yeah, I've gone through them. Except it started with a straw hat, but I always wore out the little corner up here with a straw hat. So finally ran across these hot felt hats.
That's what they're called, hot felts?
Oh, they look good, don't they?
They look real good.
No, they sweat a lot in the summer is what they do. But what's funny is when I get them, it looks nothing like this. It takes a hard day's work in the rain, and it starts to form to you and becomes your own. But yeah, the hats it's become a pretty unique signature of mine. I'm known more for my hat than I am my name, which is a big change. Mayo, mayonnaise, and ketchup and mustard. And so
is mayo your favorite condiment? I wanted to.
Of course it is.
I meant to ask that earlier.
Absolutely. My doctor doesn't need to hear this though. But to answer your the dog thing, the tip of the day here is if for all you canoe owners, when you have a dog, don't put them in the middle. Put the dog in the front of the canoe. Especially labs or bigger dogs that like to move from side to side. When the dog's in the middle of the canoe, it'll move to one side to the other. Yeah. By pushing it up towards the front, which of course the bow rider needs to know this, that there's going to be a dog up there, of course. But this is it's very handy. If otherwise, I've seen canoes flip so many times when the dog is moved to the center and starts moving back and forth. It kind of creates instability. Same for a child, but normally don't have that issue. And if there's a child that's too young to sit on the seat, we have little fold-out chairs. We sit on the bottom of the canoe so that the child is comfortable and not sitting in the water or nothing like that. So fully looking out.
Nice. We're just looking at me and Randall now. Who do you think's more outdoorsy?
Well, what I feel like with the bleeding over here, we're already we drew first blood, and in those Stallone movies, that would be the most important part right there.
Yep.
So I hate to say it, but it looks like we have our winner.
That's
But
pretty good.
missing
good
the
job.
beard.
I know. I
We
with
got
my
a beard on this side.
factoring
Fill
that
in the
in.
lookout. So,
Well, no. So Tom, you hit it right on the head because Tom doesn't like bugs or being
I
outside.
got that as a question coming up.
But I do. I think it's cool, and I've always thought whenever I'm going, and usually it's hunting or fishing, but there's a vest that you can wear that would be like a standard thing for fishing.
right, that's right.
But then the hat, I just never really felt comfortable in a cowboy hat. I never felt comfortable in a
Hot
I don't
felt.
want to say fedora. Yeah, like a fedora type thing, or even that specific one. So maybe you can coach me a little in what I should do for a hat.
What should he wear outside? Yeah, he needs fashion tips.
I can't answer that. The hat will find you. I mean, when it finds you, you'll know
That's
it.
good coaching.
Should I be seeking it though? Or do I just wait for it to come to me?
Well, never pass up an opportunity to put on a good hat.
agree with
And quickly kind of look over your shoulder, see if there's a mirror nearby, walk away.
See if it's.
Quickly.
I mean, I just have such weird fashion sense that I just know every time I put it on and I love it that it just doesn't seem right. Have you ever put on a hat and knew that it didn't look right, but it felt right?
I did, and
Yeah.
and I realized at that point all my friends were lying to me. They had never told me the truth.
All right, so tell us more. Like, what else in the Columbia area is like the outdoor scene? What are things that the listeners like? I didn't know about whitewater anything, but I'm not an outdoors person. Is there anything else like around the area that people should know that they could get their kids out there, or just be outside and enjoy Columbia outdoors?
Yes. That's a great question. There is. I kind of alluded to it earlier. The green space is what they call it, the river walks, the riverfront canal, but really it's just all the paved green space. It was a priority of the River Alliance, who developed a lot of this green space, that not only should the trails be wide, but they have to be ADA accessible. So if there's a mobility issue of any sort, that should not impede you from not only enjoying the riverbanks and the access to those riverbanks, the events that go on, like the West Columbia Riverwalk Amphitheater. They have Rhythm on the River. And so things like that anyone and everyone will be able to enjoy. We hope that, again, more access shows up to these points, and in time they will. That's my job, is to sound that horn. But yeah, we see that, there is the green space is important for people to get out, to check out. Children, anybody can enjoy. There's plaques along the way to learn about the history. Mm-hmm. There is a rich history here. I do think our resistance to progress, in a way, also has allowed us to be able to take time to decide what to do with some of these vacant lots that still haven't been developed along the riverbank.
Right.
Like right there where that cofferdam is, and the coal tar being pulled out. So that's one neat thing. But before we get there, let me tell you about another spot. So you got the green space, you got the riverbanks. Those are nice. Irmo Chapin Recreation Center does a good job, like Saluda Shoals. I know the Lexington County Recreation Aging Commission also does a great job with their parks in Lexington.
Nice.
But there is one in particular that I've known about since I was a young lad. It's the Peachtree Reserve. Are you familiar with this at all? The Peachtree Reserve? Well, we mentioned waterfalls a minute ago. I mean, if you call a trickle a waterfall, but it's just enough. And if you go out there after a rain, it's a little bit bigger. But it is pretty cool. It's probably like a 12-foot little trickle right off of a wall. If you got children, nieces and nephews, it is a very valuable spot to go out there. It's a minimal hike, easy to get to.
Is that what you would Google? You would Google
Peachtree Preserve. Peachtree Preserve. I've known about it since certainly high school. I ain't gonna tell my teachers, but it might have snuck out there a couple times. But it's the spot where it's been known by the locals for years. It's off the beaten trail, so you gotta look it up to find it. Not much parking, Don't park in the sand too deep. You might get stuck. You might stay there longer than you want to. But I did want to point that out. Peachtree, it's in Lexington County. The Peachtree Preserve, look it up and you'll find it. But certainly there is a lot to see. If you want to expand out of this area, as I said, Congaree National Park, half an hour drive from Columbia, but also a half an hour away from Columbia is a 30-foot waterfall. Something you
that?
have to go to the Appalachians to check out. But if you go up to Great Falls, South Carolina,
Okay.
drive up 77 and you'll see the exit. Right before you get into the Great Falls city proper, you'll see the Carolina Crossroads Trailhead. It's I can't remember the creek off the top of my head, but for one of their creeks right there. But either way, there's a 30-foot waterfall right there. And again, you park, you walk 200 feet and walk around the bend, and there it is. It's not natural, but
still cool.
Yes.
Yep.
I'll let you go look at it.
Yep.
Then if you want to know why it's not natural, I'll tell you why. But otherwise, as far as I'm concerned, you don't get a 30-foot waterfall unless you drive 2 hours north. So
Right.
this is, again, half an hour up 77 to Great Falls, South Carolina, the Carolina Crossroads Trail. And then, again, 30 minutes south, as we talked about, Congaree National Park. Don't just go for the canoe trip. Certainly go check out the Harry Hampton Visitor Center. Go talk to a ranger. Ask them some questions.
Oh, yeah.
But more particularly, talk to them about the synchronized fireflies.
Ooh.
Do y'all know about those?
Nope.
No? Okay. Well, first and foremost, and this
Is that
goes
why we're called the Fireflies, the baseball team?
haha, very good. It ties it in well. Now, synchronized, that's what the team's trying to do right now. Right. But yeah, we'll call them the Fireflies, and they're a great baseball team. But the synchronized Fireflies, I want to start off with all your listeners also knowing that if anyone invites you to go see the synchronized Fireflies at the Congaree National Park, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
The option to say no doesn't exist. It's a rare opportunity. It used to be something that now I regret not going to see more. It used to be unregulated. You could go anytime and see these synchronized fireflies. What this is there's two species of fireflies that synchronize. There's fireflies all over the place,
Right.
But there's only two species that synchronize, and one of those species is Congaree National Park, and the other species is in the Great Smokies, but on the Tennessee side. So these are only two spots where you can see them synchronize. And why this is important, it's a mating ritual and all that. I don't know all the details there. We'll get someone from the park to come tell you that story. But I've been there to see it personally. And if you ever want to see the woods breathe, Mother Nature breathe its breath, you can see that through the synchronized fireflies.
That's cool.
It's just like watching both sides. Ever heard the cicadas in the summertime? It sounds like you hear the trees talking to one another. Same thing for the fireflies.
It's like Avatar kind of.
Yeah. Oh, just as close as you'll ever get to a 4D Avatar. And it's a great experience. So again, this is something that people are definitely driving from Florida to come up here to do, but they can't get in. And so there's a lot of and understood. I want to be very clear here. The Park Service, sometimes you can love something to death. Does that make sense? And so the Park Service has done a good job in stepping in and making sure that that it doesn't get overrun by tourists. And so there's a lottery system. Certainly get you and your family to get on the lottery so that at least maybe you'll be lucky enough to invite you and a couple friends.
How do you get in the lottery?
Website. It's CMP.org, I believe. But actually, just go ahead and get on the search engine and Google Congaree National Park. This is the time. It may not be up yet, but they should have information already listed as to when the lottery may be coming. But just like storms and Mother Nature, she doesn't run by our calendar.
Right.
The synchronized fireflies, it's difficult to pin down exactly when they're going to sync up.
Yeah.
It's about a two week period, but during that there's a peak moment, and so they approach it. The Park Service, as of last year, approached it like a kind of like a storm forecast, where they kind of gave you a percentage as to when the peak would be and stuff. So until they can lock that down, they can't really release the lotto. But they'll have the instructions further there. But the thing is, you do want to get on the lottery. If your number's picked, you get to bring a carload of people with you. But one example of one detriment to the fireflies is when you arrive, you'll immediately be instructed not to spray insect repellent.
Really?
because
What
it
do you do
has.
about the bugs?
You don't. You deal with it.
Oh God!
I know. And I tell you,
Walk around in a net.
in May, boy, they are on.
Just stay in the car. Can you see them from
Yeah,
the
is there
car?
a video I can watch from the car?
But I promise you, it won't last forever. The pain will eventually subside in time, the bugs. It's always during dusk that they get really active. Same for the fireflies. But then, of course, probably 30 minutes after sunset,
Yeah.
you won't worry about a bug.
How long do you watch them for? Is it like a
Boy, I wish I would have started when I was young on this. I've learned a lot on my last trip. It's not short. It's, I mean,
Magical.
Yeah, it is 15 minutes, maybe 20 of magic. You get maybe a prep time of 5 and 10 minutes. You get a post time of 5 and 10 minutes. But when that forest is breathing, yeah, it's impressive for a short period of time. The Park Service does a good job. You know, your lights on your flashlight, you got to get a filter so, you know, you're not shining your flashlight around. So they're doing things to help mitigate the damage that can be done by traffic. But, you know, stick to the boardwalks that they have listed. But that is a big forest, and there's a lot to explore.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd have walked deep into it a little bit earlier last year than I did. So yeah, I missed my moment.
And it's cool to hear this because we had one. She was our front desk, Christina, who moved here from Colorado.
Sweet.
Or no, she moved here from California in 2020.
Even better.
And she kept saying to us like, "Where do I go? I'm really outdoorsy. I want to
Yeah.
go do stuff." And we kept saying like, "No clue."
The zoo.
Right,
we
right.
said we just said I don't know. And then we had another one, Heather's from Colorado, who kept saying, "Hey, I'm really outdoorsy. I want to know where to go." And we just kept saying, "Nope, no clue. Go talk to Christine." And Christine was still like, I don't even know yet. So, but I'm wondering how, like, if people go to your website, or what does it look like for people to maybe contact you and decide where they want to go and what they want to do and what all their options are.
We are your encyclopedia. Let us tell you. You're always welcome to call and ask a question about anything related to the river. That's what we're here to do. We're here to inform and instruct you as to where to go further. We are actually in the process of updating our website to also list other interests along the way, just kind of like I pointed out about the Marionette Theater.
Yeah.
I'm also kicking myself for not being more proactive in trying to engage some of these other activities. So, multi-day activity is our business, and they can call and ask anytime. However, in a short, I'd say in the near future, very near future, before our season starts, you'll see it live on our website. There'll be like other points of interest
Stuff going on, yeah.
Click on that. You'll see like things like Peachtree, Great Falls.
What about that Bomb Island where all the birds come?
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's really good. Okay, that's a fantastic item to talk about. So the purple martins, every year there's a herd of them that come.
That's insane.
They'll kind of circle around the island. It's really neat to watch.
Yeah.
We also have, on the Saluda, we have barn swallows. They're also a lot of fun to watch, too. They're not as dynamic as the purple martins, but a lot of birds are more interesting than you give them credit for. I don't have a favorite bird.
Yeah. Are there any sweet birds?
Yes, tons.
Yeah.
There's
What
bunches.
about the bald eagle?
We have bald eagles.
How is that not your favorite bird?
I saw one
That's
this
gotta
morning.
be your favorite bird.
Maybe. I got more. It is. There's a bald eagle's nest on the float tubing. When you do the tubing trip, you can spot a bald eagle's nest, but you have to look over your left shoulder. They've done a good job of engineering the nest up into there's 2 tall pine trees, and it's in the second tall pine tree, but you can't see it on the approach. It's the size of a tree house. It's a huge nest, as big as the area we're sitting right here, and but you can't see it on the approach. You have to look over your shoulder back upstream, and you'll spot it clear as day. So a lot of our customers never see it, but it's there. As far as I know, according to our birders, if fledglings are out there every spring hatching, we've got to see the magnificent, fish catch by the eagle where it swoops down and grabs the fish.
That'd be
A lot of
awesome.
fun. I don't think there's
Richard would love
Oh
that.
my
Yeah,
God, my dad obsesses over eagles.
and that's I thought so too. I thought I was an eagle
Yeah.
person myself, but then you get to see an osprey hunt for fish, and that's where I can never pick my favorite bird. An osprey, unlike an eagle, will fly. It'll fly around a little bit, then it'll stop in the air and kind of tuck its wings back and start basically stalling. And it's more or less probably lining up its targeting device.
Really?
At which point then it tucks its wings, drops like a bullet, and hits the water at like 90 miles
Like
an
head,
hour.
like beak
Head
first?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, actually, okay. So then it grabs the fish, and when it does, unlike eagles that just carry it horizontal or long ways,
Yeah.
the osprey will turn it in a more aerodynamic fashion to carry
Really?
the bird. So a unique feature for the osprey. But yeah, it's hitting the water at a fast speed.
That's sweet.
About 2 years ago, an image got put up on I guess social media is where I saw it. But he was able to grab the split second the bird
Hit the water.
yeah, and it shows his talons actually out in front of his beak. But yeah, it's all a forced drive in. But when you see that for your first time and you see it pull a
That's
fish
cool.
out, you're like, okay, that's my favorite bird.
Yeah.
But then you see the blue heron. The blue heron is unlike any bird. It's just like one of those big cruising bomber planes that just hover a foot off of the water. Big old bird like that landing in a limb in a tree, it deserves its own respect.
Yeah,
it's an appropriate fishing bird because it stands there in patience and waits to get its prey. So that's my favorite bird.
Right.
But it's always fun. Bottom line is, and then the barn swallows, they're like jet fighters. For about 2 weeks, same as the fireflies, these barn swallows fly around the Millrace Rapids.
Yeah.
And I've got to witness this several times. And you can too. Come down to the Riverwalk and watch this. I'd say about 1st April, end of April, 1st of May. But you get to see these these little tiny birds, but they can cut at any point. And what they'll do is they'll dip down and cut in between the rocks.
Yeah.
And they look like, some type of Top Gun movie where they're
That's
just
cool.
cutting in and out, diving in. They come flying out the other side of the rock. So maybe that's my favorite bird.
I'll tell you what a sweet bird is. The hummingbird.
The one that the proper stalling bird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've seen those too.
Hummingbirds are-
Birds are pretty cool. They're pretty cool. There's a lot of them.
That's a good point.
You can see them all from the Riverwalk. All these points that I've been talking about, thanks to the new Saluda Riverwalk, right, as you were mentioning, one right there where you go left to go to the zoo or go to the right up Candy Lane. There's 2 parking lots, so plenty of parking. But the Saluda Riverwalk currently is it's an island. So when you get to the parking lot, you can go either 1.5 miles downstream, or let's just say 2 miles downstream, or 2 miles upstream. But then you have to turn around and come back. Now, pretty soon they're going to get a bridge built across the Broad, again through the direction of Mike Dawson with the River Alliance. When they make that connection, yes, you'll be able to go from Main Street, Columbia, to the zoo, to the rapids. Hopefully one day when they finish the Crossroads project and connect it with Saluda Shoals, you'll be able to go all the way to the dam, watch the sunset, and for a monetary fee, I'll bring you back to your car. But these are the things that are coming. But right now, if you go there, you can only go to a dead end in both directions. Still worth the trip. But if you want to know which way would I go, when you get down in the parking lot, you'll go down to a T where you can either go upstream or downstream. You want to go left, which is downstream. That will take you to Boyd's Island. Can't say enough about the Boyd Foundation. They've been instrumental in helping to advance projects through seed money. Can't say enough about them. They're amazing. And same for the Ginyards. But at the same time, the Boyd's Island, which is still being it's finished as far as the Riverwalk, but it's having art features being added to it, numerous features being added to it. I don't want to speak on that. But if you go to Boyd's Island right now, there's an overlook where the confluence takes place, and kind of this area, this estuary, you'd say, exist. You can see this from land instead of having to, get out there by boat. Now, because of the Riverwalk, you can go see that bald eagle's nest.
Nice.
You can see the osprey fish, and what makes it neat is you have the 2 rivers that merge right there. Quickly, do want to say there's catfish all in the Broad.
Yep.
There's striper, which is your fighting fish, your champion fish. That fish kind of starts around the Millrace Rapids, the big rapid behind the zoo.
Yep.
And from that point downstream, you can have a good spot to catch striper. You'll see a lot of fishermen line up at the bridges to catch the striper run. But trout, that's what makes this area extra unique, is that we have a trout fishery. there's no other rivers in the Piedmont or the Low Country that have trout. And the reason why is trout need that crisp, cool water. You're going to find out what the temperature of the river is now. But because Dominion or the Dreher Shoals Dam releases water at 52 degrees year-round, when you drive across the dam, you see those towers out there.
Yeah.
Those towers are the intake towers, but they're like 200 feet tall. They go into the water down to the depths. That's not affected by sunlight. It's basically just the temperature of the earth. And so 52 degrees year-round at discharge. And therefore, it's like a mountain stream. So DNR, they'll stock the river every late December, early January. So just about now, you'll see a lot of fly fishermen come here and fish from, I would say, below the dam all the way to the Mill Race Rapids, the big rapid behind the zoo. So you can be your river runs through it, fly fisherman that morning. You can throw on your striper champion vest and go catch that 20-pounder. And then go noodling in the evening.
I got obsessed with noodling for a
You've
little
done
while.
it?
I've never done it.
Okay.
I went to my friend, his name's Aaron, in Illinois, and they call it bank polling.
Okay.
So you just have a little stick in there in the bank, and you put 30 of them, and there's just a little piece of meat, and the catfish come out of the hole. But I watched all kinds of, that was back in the DVD days. I'd watch DVDs where they'd stick their hand straight in a hole in the bank and come out with a massive catfish. But then I started hearing stuff about snakes, which I think got ingrained in me by my grandpa because he grew up in the desert with rattlesnakes everywhere. But I feel like you could stick your hand in there and there'd be a snake sitting in there too. So maybe that's just my worry.
They didn't talk about the river eels?
I don't know about a river eel either. I'm assuming it's some sort of snake.
They don't ever talk about the river eels.
Yep.
Man, they're elusive. They're hard to find.
Yes.
They're kind of like the Loch Ness Monster, you know.
Yes.
Do they really live out there or not?
We better tell our kids about those.
I had so as far as cocktails, how many cocktails do you recommend somebody bringing on the tubing adventure?
That's a great question. I like that one the most. We cannot see any consumption of alcohol before or after the trip.
Oh.
What you do on that river is none of our business.
Or before the river.
We encourage you to have a good time, and we like to do the same at Palmetto Outdoor. Actually, we have to be cautious with that, just like that waiver. I don't know if it was on yours, but there is a portion that says I'm not under the influence of alcohol or drugs and whatnot to sign your life away and all that fun stuff ahead of the trip.
Yep.
So you got to be somewhat,
bases,
you got to have your wherewithal about you when you go to sign that waiver. I'm not acting like we have any police down there, but we are in West Columbia, and they have the best police department in the state.
Boom. And you said you're a Class 5 boater. What is that?
Well, 6 is typically end it for your kayaking career. But when I was explaining earlier, that varies from 1 to 5.
Yeah.
And so or 1 to 6. The 5 being
that's for the rapids.
Rapids, yeah. And
gotcha.
Class 6 is just completely it's terminal. You might as well run Niagara and see if you make it out the other side. So not saying Class 6s haven't been run. Dynamics of boats change over time. You can run bigger stuff, things like that. The industry is nothing like what it was when it started. But that's a great question because it leads me to one of my it takes me home to the place where I belong. I go up every September to West Virginia and paddle some of those whitewater rapids up there. And one of those rivers is the Gauley River, which is the upper Gauley and the lower Gauley. If you want to go run those rivers, start on the lower, see what you think, then move to the upper. But the upper has just been known for the Southeast as like the granddaddy of all Class 5 rivers, even though it'd be argued that the New River Gorge is also the granddaddy of all rivers. But what the point is that on the upper Gauley, there's 5 Class 5s. These are raftable. Big waves, big holes, everything's big. Lost Paddle, one of the rapids, is about half a mile long. So, when you get to the bottom and I point back up to the top and say that's where you started, it's hard to believe that that's where we were just 2 minutes ago. But then you have Sweets Falls where the entire river just falls off a cliff about 12, 15 feet. It gave us a ride for our money this year. We got to all go swimming at the bottom of Sweets this year. But a lot of fun, like good times. And again, this river it's hard to compete with, like the Chattooga River Nolichucky, HFTHOI, Nantahala, these rivers that are in the mountains.
Yeah.
It's hard to compete with stuff like the big rivers in West Virginia, but what it can compete with is the amenities.
Yeah.
And when we're trying to find a diversified family activity that everyone feels welcome doing, that's where these cities that we have here is perfect. You have the hotels that want to host, and then you have a diverse amount of restaurants to pick from. And, one thing I do like to always point out, and I'm big on this, is diversity. We have customers that walk up to us and tell us that they can't swim.
Yeah.
We don't shy away from that.
Yeah.
Instead, we embrace that. We'll help them get their life jacket fitted. We'll walk them down to the water like everybody else.
Yeah.
We'll give them the safety speech and try to give them a little fear, but at the same time, comfort them to let them know they'll be okay. And then we take them down to the water and let them float, make sure they feel buoyant.
Yep.
And once they do and they feel safe, if they want to continue, then that's their choice, and we'll help them get in their tube. Otherwise, they can go back, full refund and all that stuff. Sure. So the point is, most of our customers keep on going.
Yeah.
When they get done, they're glad they did.
Did you say there was a weight limit?
300 pounds. Working on that.
Okay.
We are, we could talk about this on a whole nother segment, but because of supply chain issues and COVID, we actually we ran into sourcing issues for our tubes.
Oh.
One thing that's important to point out, and you can see this on the website, but our tubes are not rubber tubes, aren't car tires. They're commercial tubes designed for whitewater rivers.
Oh, gotcha.
And so when I did go with my initial proposal to operate, in the different municipalities, I wanted to make sure they knew that we were using the best material out there. So we have an array of equipment now. We have a standard tube for $20, but it all started with the deluxe tube. That's the one that's $25, includes a life jacket and the shuttle. But it's the one that you see, it's blue, has a nylon cover, similar to what you'd see on a backpack made out of. Yep. But that goes around a vinyl bladder. But it's not just one bladder, but it's two, so that if there was an incident, you have a secondary system to back you up. So, again, way different than a car tire. But what really separates us from the rest of the world is the mesh bottom, which women and youth really appreciate. It's a porous mesh, so the water can come in, goes right out, and then D-ring, so you can hook multiple tubes together. We suggest 3 at a time. But to get back to your point, we ran into supply issues, and because we don't want to use a cheaper tube. Yep. We still want to use this high quality commercial tube. We couldn't source them anymore, so we had to design and make our own. And so we are now manufacturing our own deluxe tube. And why stop there, right? So we decided, hey, everyone wants a double tube, and they want to be able to put a small cooler in the middle. So we have these green machines now that we also manufactured and got in just in the nick of time for last summer. But it was one of our most popular options. We rent them for $80, and it's a double tube with a space in the middle for your cooler. And that's where you asked about the weight limit. Yep. We're able to utilize that tube for individuals who are a little bit bigger.
Okay.
Now, we are also in the process of probably manufacturing a larger size tube. But if you want to have a number, 300 pounds is probably about as far as you want to go with weight.
With the blue guy?
With the blue guy. And then you could go a little bit further beyond that with the double tube, only having, of course, one person in it. But what's important to note, no matter what, is this activity involves you having to be able to paddle your tube with your hands. You have to have somewhat of you don't have to necessarily be physically fit, but there is a physicality that takes place during this trip. It's not a lazy river, and I don't want to sell this as a lazy river. You don't get on this river and it takes you to the end. You will be in control of your tube from the beginning to end. You want to manipulate the currents. You want to manipulate the wind.
Right.
You don't want to sit in an eddy and think that, a groundhog's going to come down here and push you out into the water. It's not going to happen. So anyone who does this activity needs to be capable of, one, carrying a 50-pound box up 2 flights of stairs. I'm sorry, but if you can't do that, you don't need to be out there on that river.
Right.
So that really is, we have our little tools that we use to make sure the customer
They can do it.
Yeah, and we can relate it to them. Another thing is age. I've had an 80-year-old 80-year-old grandmother go down this river, had the time of her life. Came back several more years.
Yeah.
We hope she still shows up this coming up year. But then also have run into an incident where the grandmother gets to or grandfather, either one, the individual senior gets down to the water's edge and now is having maybe chest issues from just the walk. So we want to never get to that point.
Yeah.
And if we can explain to you whether you need to be out here or not by saying, can you get a 50-pound box up a 2 flights of stairs, and you say no, then there's your answer.
Yep. Is there an exit point? Like, say they get 15 minutes into it and they're like, this is taxing.
Back to the green space.
I just got bit by 8 mosquitoes.
Yeah, bugs.
That's a good question. There's no bugs on in the Three Rivers Greenway, so you ain't got to worry about bugs and whatnot. No gators.
Nice.
And again, you have a better chance of seeing snakes on the riverbank than you do in the river. So no snakes in the river, no gators in the river, no bugs in the river. You're good to go there.
Nice.
But yeah, individuals who are looking to feel like, well, I was telling you about the first rapid is called the pop-up hole.
Yep.
It's a short rapid. It's very simple. It'd be a class 1, but if it dunks you, I think you would call it a class 2. Yeah. But it's got a little edge on it, and if you run the little tongue, it's easy. But if you run the ledge, it might flip you. We've had customers from time to time flip out there. At that point, we generally have a staff member there, safety personnel, to make sure you're safe, feel good, and want to continue.
Yep.
If they don't want to continue, then what is really nice, and I can't say enough about the green space and the river walks, but there is a river walk that is adjacent to you through the majority of the flat water. But once you go into the Botanical Garden Bridge, you float around the elbow of the zoo, you'll start seeing on the horizon line some rocks approaching. Those that let you know that Shandon is nearby. As you get to those rocks, now you got a decision. You can, if you want, exit the river, get on the river walk, and carry your tube that mile back to the gate. We'll come pick you up.
Yep.
We're not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. But once you make the turn to the right, and once you commit to the rapid, that's it. There is no turnaround. Everything's private property. The riverbanks are so wide, there is no option. You are on your own. But if you look at the river in segments of 3, the first third is the flat water to Shandon.
Yep.
And once you get to Shandon, now you're committed for the whitewater, which is another third. You go into the estuary where you get to see the birds and all that, and the currents merge. But then you come around the bend, you see the State House. For a lot of our customers, it's just that middle third that you have to realize is a commitment. So if the weather's not looking good and you're like, I don't know about this third, then you need to exit the river, get back to the gate, and we'll come pick you up.
Nice.
And then 5 minutes later, it stops raining, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned Niagara Falls. I want to ask you about this because I think I had on my vision board, and for years I did a different vision board every day, but one of them was go down Niagara Falls in a barrel.
Yeah.
Has that ever been on your bucket list?
I say slowly I turn, step by step, inch by inch. I've been to Niagara. I've got to see both sides of the falls. Running that in a barrel would be interesting, and you certainly want to go off the Canadian side versus the others, the Veiled Falls. However, there's a Class 5 gorge below the falls. Some of the biggest whitewater in the world lies below Niagara Falls. I think they got one eddy. It's called the Whirlpool. But it's like seeing the entire volume of what is the Congaree, what's below Gervais. It's like watching that entire volume go in a circle over and over again because Niagara's so big.
Yeah.
If you decide when you get there with your barrel, I hope it's a nice and
I don't
insulated.
think once I had kids, I decided I'm not doing that anymore. But
But what if they want to?
I mean, I guess I'd probably do it.
Then you're going to want to
I wouldn't say no. If one of my kids said to me, I want to go down a barrel in Niagara Falls, I don't think I would say no to them.
Well, when they get to the top.
But I would bring you with me.
When they get to the top and they're questioning themselves, then remind them that there's an incredible whitewater experience below that if you run it here on the drop, you don't get to run it below because they're going to pull you out before you get to run the whitewater.
You don't just have to survive once. You have to survive twice.
Several. Then don't get sucked up into the hydro plant at the end, right? But yeah, it is a beautiful place. I really enjoyed taking a second to go check out Niagara. Did you do the boat ride up into the?
I never did the boat
West?
ride. I grew up in Canada, but I grew up in the West, by the Rocky Mountains in Alberta. So I've only been to Niagara, seen Niagara, I think once, and it was from a distance.
Oh man, it's beautiful. I've been to the boundary waters up around in Canada, Quatico and whatnot, like 2 weeks with the lakes that were cut through by the gorges and all that. It was one of the most magical experiences of my life because what you see generally here when it comes to whitewater, it's typically dammed up. For instance, underneath Lake Murray, there's actually a 30-foot waterfall. There's two 15-foot cascades that got drowned when they built the river. But there's in Canada around Quatico, the lakes were naturally cut by glaciers, and so a lot of the portages that you would do, you're typically walking beside a river where one lake empties into another, and there's obviously gradient between the two. So you're just like, you feel like you're in the movies, just walking these trails that, French voyagers were blazing through. You were paddling across lakes and using blazes cut into trees to know where your next portage was. But I never will forget that. I got to see things that only I wouldn't say a handful, but only a few have got to see. So it's a beautiful land in Canada, that's for sure. And the biggest mosquitoes I've ever seen in my life. I've never been chased from a pine tree back to my tent so quick.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's insane.
Yeah.
They're huge. They're the mammoths of the mosquito world.
One of the biggest differences moving from Canada to here was that the mosquitoes here are
You
so
laugh
tiny.
at them?
Yeah, so little. And the deer.
Yeah, they are. There's so many of them, though. Drive safe at night.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Well, that was great. Great info.
Man,
We
had a
appreciate
good
that.
time.
How do people? Yeah, where do you want people to find you? Websites and
Okay,
all
yeah,
that
yeah.
good stuff.
Again, my name is Michael Mayo, but I go by Ketchup and Mustard. You can check out our website at www.palmettooutdoor.com, or you can shoot us an email at info@palmettooutdoors.com. Also, we are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, soon maybe to be TikTok, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, this is a very unique activity that works well for the city. I certainly want to plug Experience Columbia, the marketing wing of the city. They are doing a great job of acknowledging the resources, not just the river, but all the auxiliary resources that can support recreational tourism. And I always like to say that we like to use recreational resources as a means for relocation. And what I mean by that is we don't just want families to visit here from Florida. We want them to move here from Florida because they love what it has to offer. So it's we appreciate you to help get the word out on what we have. I don't ever want to forget, we want to show you what's in your backyard. I always talk tourism, but I don't forget the community.
Yeah.
Ultimately, community buy-in is what it takes for this to all work.
Right.
And so, first and foremost, if you haven't had an opportunity to get out and see I think it's 14 plus miles of ADA accessible paved pathways, restrooms, all you need to get out and see them today. After you've enjoyed that, the DNR Heritage Preserve is a little side shoot. There's just so much to do, and more on the way.
Well, real quick before we end it, I know number ones are probably fine on the tubing, but what do people do for number twos? Do they get off and get one in one of these restrooms, or have you had anybody number two while they're tubing?
It's
the mesh.
In the mesh.
It is a funny thing. The one thing I have to
Just
give.
popped it away. You said restrooms. I'm like, where do you go?
Oh man, I certainly don't want to act like it ain't happened, but I don't want to tell that story today. But I will say this much: Mother Nature actually, I definitely like how its clock works here when it comes to water sports and bathroom or bowel movements.
Yep.
Typically, Mother Nature does a good job shutting those things down while you're floating in your tube. I'm only speaking for myself personally here. But generally, you were burning some calories and consuming some water and only filling yourself back up with typically beverages of beer and whatnot. So you're not necessarily giving it much to work with either. So, but yeah, it's been a good time. We also, our guides know what to do in that circumstance. We're ready and prepared. Ziploc bags and a little bit of a roll. Don't pick the poison ivy. That's the time to know the difference between actual leaves and poison ivy, right?
Right. Thanks for being on.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope to see y'all soon. Appreciate it, guys. Thank y'all.
Here
We're here for the health of it.
for the health of it.